Welcome back. It's your boy, Sinan Schwarting, here on a late, rainy night in New York City. Episode 20, for those of you tuning in. Boy, is this an exciting one. For starters, I'm rolling solo here. Fear not. It's planned. As always, Kaan Bayazit is on location. Actually, he's probably coming from Belgium as usual, but he's interviewed someone this episode because, as always, we're preparing for a European match. We're getting a scouting report on our opposition. As you may or may not know, this coming Thursday, August 23rd at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for me here in New York. You can do the math for that for yourselves. I think that's like 8:30 p.m. in Western Europe. I don't know. But sure enough, we're going to be playing Partizan Belgrade of Serbia. And so, as always, we've got an expert from Serbia, this time in the form of Sonja Nikcevic. Sonja is, of course, Serbian, and Kaan will be interviewing her. She is, in fact, a fairly well-established Serbian sports journalist, one who reported live from Russia for the World Cup with FIFA, so she's, in fact, yet again, very well-known and keen expert on all things Serbian football related. And as I understand it, she knows Partizan quite well, and you soon will know that yourselves. But before we jump to this week's prestigious interview, and as you know, we only have the most prestigious interviews here, of course I have to address the elephant in the room. This is probably not just in for most of you, because this is a pretty hot ticket item that you would have been focused on from the moment it came in. But of course, it's my duty to report it and impart my 2 cents on the subject. Of course, for weeks, maybe months even, Kaan and I have been very critical of Tolga Zengin and the prospects of us moving into the regular season with him as our starting keeper. And this has been addressed. Ding, ding, ding. That's correct. Well, let me preface that by saying this has hopefully been addressed. Of course, we have still not seen him appear in Istanbul. We've not seen him sitting next to a sleazy board member, forcing him with a pen to sign the documents on the dotted line. So things are not quite official yet. But from all indications, from all the serious sources out there reporting it as basically a done deal, it would seem that we have struck rich and signed ourselves a good keeper, a 25-year-old German keeper by the name of KARIUS from Liverpool. Many of you will have already known him from his exploits, perhaps last season with the team. Let's not even talk about that. And I'll leave most of the analysis to when Kaan is back and we're doing our normal stuff. But of course, it's my duty to report to you. Now, the numbers coming in are that we are going to be offering a loan, a 2-year loan, at about £2.25 million. That would be the fee for the loan itself. Of course, that's a hefty fee for a loan, but that's tied to the right to purchase the player outright. It'll be for £7.25 million, theoretically in 2020, although supposedly we could extend pay that buyout fee whenever we'd want, in theory. And so next year we should be lucky enough to break out of this whole FFP situation. Perhaps we could even make it concrete then if we choose, if he's earned it. But anyway, those are the figures for a total of about £9.5 million. I don't know, it's probably something like €10.5 million, I believe, but I'm no currency expert. So there you have it. That's the news, and the good news, I should say. Again, most of the analysis I'll be leaving for Kaan's triumphant return. But until then, I think we can mostly revile in the success of our first big move of the transfer window. And of course, look out for the official announcement, hopefully for, the whole airport scene and all of that. But until then, let's just keep our fingers crossed that none of this Ospina stuff comes up again. Other than that, there's not much to report. We're supposedly still looking around for Kagawa. There was rumors of him asking for something like a $4 million salary. We'll see how that goes. No news yet. Nasser Shadley's still in the news. I think I saw something about Ljajic or something. But, I'll leave all speculation aside because today's focus is on our match preview. And let me, without further ado, cut to it. Black Eagles podcast listeners, in our efforts to make you the most informed wing of the Beşiktaş fan base, we present to you Sonja Nikcevic, interviewed by Kaan Bayazit. Stay tuned.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Black Eagles podcast. Today in preview for the Partizan and Beşiktaş game on Thursday, and of course the return a week later, I have a very special guest for you, Sonja Nikcevic from Serbia through Italy, I believe, and she works for AIPS, I believe. Is that correct, Sonja?
Yeah, that's it. So I'm a journalist editor and kind of head of communications for AIPS, which is the International Association of Sports Journalists.
And if I'm not mistaken, Sonja, you had a very productive summer these past couple of months, right? You were in Russia, I believe, as the official, FIFA's official journalist to report directly on the Serbian national team.
I had a very fun summer. I just came back from Russia. What was it now? At the end of June, and I was the team reporter for Serbia. So basically, kind of like the embedded team journalist who went around with the team and kind of provided content for FIFA Digital, for the FIFA website and for their social media. We had a Twitter account and everything, and basically followed the team's journey to what was their first World Cup in 8 years and major competition after being out of the Euros in 2016, the World Cup after that. So there was a lot of good energy around the Serbian team, and I was really happy to be able to kind of be a part of it and to report on it for FIFA.
Yeah, it was Serbia, I think, conquered the hearts of many football fans this past World Cup. They played very positive football, and it was a shame, really, I think, kind of the way they lost against Switzerland, because having to win that last match against Brazil, that was a tall order, but it was a kind of a shame not to see them progress, of course, and as Beşiktaş fans, we were looking towards Serbia with a little bit of an extra fondness, I should say, with, of course, Duško Tosić representing the Serbian national team, and he had a fun summer too. I think you have some fun stories about him, I believe.
Yeah, I do. I mean, he was definitely one of the pillars of that Serbian team, and he's a really big fan favorite. And the general opinion is that maybe he's not the most talented defender that you would ever meet, but that he's definitely one of the biggest fighters on the pitch, wherever he plays, whenever he plays. And he has that attitude of going for every single ball, whatever the position. And in the match against Costa Rica, he especially kind of showed that fighting spirit against a tough Costa Rican team and kind of contributed to closing all those lines for the Costa Rican forwards. And there's some amazing shots after that match of him flying through the air in all possible positions. And it was after that first match that he kind of became a little bit of a internet sensation, because I think it was a British football fan on Twitter who was watching the game kind of with half a mind, and the commentator had said Duško Tosić, but what he heard, obviously, somebody who just hears a foreign name, was something that sounded more like disco sausage. And that kind of, I remember reading that tweet. I think we had just landed on our way back from Samara from that first game against Costa Rica. I think I was at the airport waiting for our bags, And I just read that tweet and laughed out loud at Disco Sausage. And I think it became a hit among all of Serbia fans on the internet, among foreign fans. I had people messaging me saying, like, Disco Sausage, is this really a player? And then I kind of had to explain it over and over again, to the point that it actually reached Tosic. And at a press conference following the match and kind of ahead of that match, second match against Switzerland, a journalist asked him, well, what do you think? You were one of the most dedicated players. Like, we saw you flying all over the pitch. There are some great photos of kind of you flying through the air. And could we give you a new nickname like Flying Duško? And his reply, and he's not a very talkative player. I don't know if you have that same image of him in Turkey, but he's not the most talkative player for the national team. He's more like kind of quiet and then does his talking on the pitch.
Yes, exactly.
And he was like, yeah, you could call me that. I mean, you can call me whatever you want. You could even call me Flying Sausage if you want to. And I mean, the laughter in that press conference was, I mean, the atmosphere was fantastic anyway, because Serbia had just beaten Costa Rica. But that was the kind of thing that really showed that there was a really good atmosphere in the team. And so Tosic was one of the stars there for sure.
That's a wonderful story. But 3 years ago, when I don't want to spend too much time talking about a former player now, but I do want to touch a little bit on it to get your take on this. 3 years ago, when Duško first signed for Beşiktaş, I have to say, nobody had big expectations for him. He came from Gösterili, and for a couple of years he was already known as one of the better defenders in the league, but I think at the time as well he wasn't like a full-fledged starter for Serbia, and I don't think anyone would have expected or believed you if you would have said in 3 years' time he's going to have 100 appearances for the club, including in the Champions League solid performances. I don't think anyone would have imagined that, but he really did conquer the hearts of the fans, and like you say, maybe not the best footballer in the world, but such a warrior that likes to do his talking on the pitch. And do you think that despite him already being 30 when he joined Beşiktaş, did you see any sort of a transformation in him in the last 3 years that made him into being a starter for Serbia?
I think a lot of it had to do with his confidence. And like you said, he wasn't a starter before. And there was a question of, there was kind of like a little bit of a merry-go-round of change of coaches in Serbia, and nobody really knew how our defense looked at that point. And he was one of the ones who was always a fighter for the team, but who didn't know how to make a slip-upper there when his confidence wasn't high. And I feel like that move to Beşiktaş came at the perfect moment for him, where he kind of grew in confidence match in and match out. And like you said, kind of conquered the hearts of the players at the same time, and kind of showed the Serbian kind of fans back home, and then the national team coach, first Muslin and afterwards Krstajić for the World Cup as well, how he could be counted on and how his confidence was at a high level. And I mean, Beşiktaş had a fantastic last season, as we all know how far they made it in the Champions League, and I think that all of that kind of contributed to Tosic's own confidence growing. And I think that even though he's past 30 now, I think that with defenders, that doesn't necessarily have to mean that they're near the end of their careers yet. And I think that his move to China was seen as a really big kind of reward for all the hard work that he'd done, both for the national team and for Beşiktaş. And he's really a hard worker, a fighter, and he really is the kind of player who kind of captures the hearts of fans wherever he goes. So I'm really happy to hear kind of the enthusiasm with which Turkey had kind of accepted him.
Yeah, it has to be said, I think our fans had kind of a double feeling about it, because they were kind of thinking on one side, well, he's keeping Domagoj Vida out of the team, and I think our fans kind of wanted to see Vida. But at the same time, there's a lot of sort of grief even, I think, with losing Tosic, and even his wife, very popular among the fans as well. I think I sent you that video once of her singing at one of the championship celebrations a couple of years ago. And that was also quite telling, if you remember how shy Duško was to get on stage and stuff like that. And that just perfectly fits your description of him.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, him with one of the biggest kind of pop star divas of Serbia and Serbian folk music was a hit. And that's another reason that he kind of became a talking point in Serbia, where suddenly this kind of defender who never spoke much and who kind of played well but not particularly outstanding well, kind of married the Serbian Lady Gaga, as she was especially called at that time. Yeah. And for her kind of weird outfits and strange music and kind of like outspoken opinions on everything, marries this kind of quiet footballer. And at the time, she was much more popular than him. And every time he would do something bad on the pitch, like wouldn't perform particularly well, the fans would call him Karleusha after his wife. And what I was really proud to see was that in the past year and a half especially, he kind of grew out of that shadow of his wife and became an actual fighter, warrior player that he always had the potential to be, but he grew into that himself and grew into his own confidence. And you didn't hear that once during this World Cup, a single person making a derogatory comment about him or calling him after his wife's nickname and so on. So I think that it was a really, really good year for him.
For sure, especially coming to a conclusion with that transfer, of course, which I'm sure will net him a decent pay. But let's move on to the meat and potatoes. Let's move on to the Partizan against Beşiktaş game, the thing where we both are here for and where our listeners are here for. Pardon. So the first game is being played in Partizan, and Beşiktaş and Partizan met a couple of years ago already. I believe 2014 in the group stages of the Europa League. Back then, those were two relatively easy games for Beşiktaş, but obviously I think especially when it comes to Partizan, there's probably going to be a lot of turnover in regards to the squad. Would you say that the team has changed a lot since the last time these two met?
Yeah, for sure. The team has changed quite a lot. I mean, it's almost a complete clean slate in that sense. And I think that's kind of the destiny of clubs from smaller leagues like the Serbian league, is that the turnover is quite high as soon as there's a promising young player in 2014. By 2018, that player is who knows where. And so, I mean, you have Sasha Ilic, who's in the Partizan team forever. But other than that, there's been lots of changes there. Stojkovic, the goalkeeper, is also there as the captain of the team now. But there's lots of young new players in the team, and most of all, and I think what is the talking point of this current Partizan team is the new coach, and that is a coach that came, who played his first match in the previous round of the Europa League qualifying against Nordsjælland. And I think that he came in a moment that might have changed this season around for Partizan. And that led to those two matches, a very, very good matches, has to be said for Partizan standards before that, against Nordsjælland, that led to this match against Beşiktaş. And as soon as Partizan and Beşiktaş were drawn against each other, a lot of people kind of remember that 4-0 in Belgrade in 2014, and I think that there's a lot of still kind of open wounds there, as it's Partizan's biggest home defeat in a European match in recent history.
Okay.
And the thing is that Partizan fans say that they got a very, very difficult draw, and that basically that they got the most difficult opponent that they could have at that point, given that Beşiktaş has so many big names in the team. And but a handful of optimistic fans see it as a possible opportunity to kind of get back at Beşiktaş for that 4-0, which hurt quite a lot, and that Europa League stint, which did not bode well for the club. Like, it wasn't one of the better European moments, let's just say that. And Yeah, like I said, I think that we can talk about Partizan players in this current team, and we will. But I think that the biggest change really here is the coach, and that's Zoran Mirkovic, who Bata, as we call him,
ex-Fenerbahce player.
Exactly. So I think some of your listeners might know him, and so he's an ex-Partizan legend who spent 3 years at the club before then coming back to end his career in Partizan for a while before ending his career. And I think that Mirkovic spent some years in Atalanta. He spent 2 years at Juventus, and then he moved to Fenerbahce, where he actually had, let's say, the best part of his international career. Was actually at Fenerbahce, where the first season where he came in, he made a huge impact. He won the title, if I remember correctly. And so there's lots of talk of that kind of connection as well. So, and the thing is that Mirkovic is one of the fan favorites of the club. And he was assistant coach for Montenegro for a while. And then there was kind of suddenly talk of him coming in and taking over from Miroslav Djukic, who was Partizan's coach until 2 weeks ago, and who started the first 3 matches of the season, even though there was resentment from fans at the style of play. There was resentment from the board. There was kind of resentment all around at Partizan. It kind of felt like every match, the first couple of matches that we saw, and the last couple of matches in the season as well, even though Partizan ended up winning the National Cup. The point is that it felt like one of those family dinners where everybody's mad at everybody, but nobody's really saying anything. That was kind of the atmosphere around the club at the end of last season, at the beginning of this season as well. And there was so much talk of the former coach being sacked at the end of the season. Then he wasn't, and he kind of stayed. And then everybody knew that was a bad idea. And he started out, and then the club started the season very badly in the domestic league. And then they kind of went on to go through the starting rounds of the Europa League qualifying, and they went through, but they played very, very badly with no atmosphere, no heart at all, which is the exact opposite of what Serbian clubs are expected to do, right? And I think that really everybody was mad at everybody at some point. The players weren't listening to the coach. The coach had issues with the board. The fans were mad at the board, at the coach, at the players, and it was just really, really bad. And the moment that kind of Partizan were drawn with Nordsjælland, with the Danes, everybody said, that's it, it's done, we're not going through. We barely made it past this previous round with the Lithuanian team. And then suddenly Mirkovic was appointed as the new coach instead of Djukic. And people saw a little bit of hope. And one of the reasons that Mirkovic was such a big favorite was that, a little bit like Duško Tošić, he was a fighter on the field. He was a fighter, and he was a leader, and he really made a name for himself for kind of being that figure who really embodied what it meant to fight for the crest of Partizan. And that's what fans are hoping he can put forward for as a coach as well. And that this team of players who seemed kind of listless going into the season, like they didn't know what they were playing for, why they'd have to run for 90 minutes or go forward and score a goal, suddenly have one of the most active and kind of persuasive Partizan names leading them forward. And you already see a change. Obviously, you can't see a change from day one, but against Nordsjælland, Partizan played attacking football, and like you could see faults, especially in defense, where Partizan are very shaky at the moment. But you could see a fighting spirit that wasn't there just 10 days earlier, 2 weeks before. And I think that the biggest signing that Partizan have made in this transfer window is actually that coach. So I think that could be what could help Partizan in a match against Beşiktaş, which are huge favorites here. Kind of Zoran Mirkovic putting that fighting spirit into them and saying, like, you know what? I played against Beşiktaş. I beat Beşiktaş. If I can do it, you can do it too. I'll show you how.
And for sure, I think the result from Beşiktaş against Lask in Austria must give them hope, renewed hope, maybe. I would imagine so, don't you?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, of course, a lot of Partizan fans were kind of watching that match very, very carefully, or at least the result of that match, because it was on at a similar time. But basically, everybody wanted LASK to go through, just because they are much, I think, of course, it's easier. I think it's much more even kind of matchup than this one with Beşiktaş is, where Beşiktaş are the huge favorites, obviously, with a lot more European experience.
On paper, yeah.
On paper, exactly. And I think that in that sense, yeah, everybody said that, you know what, maybe Beşiktaş is not as good as their name, because they struggled against a team which we think we can beat. So that's the question. I mean, it's the start of the season. It's always difficult to kind of be in your best form at these crucial European moments, let's say. But I think that match against LASK did give the team a little bit of hope that maybe they can cause a big upset.
Yeah, and I completely understand that line of thinking. It was, I was going to say, the worst match I've seen Beşiktaş play in a long time, but then we played a very bad first half yesterday against Erzurumspor in the league. Fortunately for Beşiktaş, they managed to play a relatively good second half and came back from 1-0 down at halftime to win that match. But Beşiktaş certainly not in the best position right now, mainly due to significant holes in the team, selling their goalkeeper that had done really well for the past 2 years, and they went back to their former goalkeeper now, who was already shaky 2 years ago. He's 35 now, even more shaky. It's possible that by the time the first match comes around, Beşiktaş will have a new goalkeeper, but he will almost certainly not play then, if they can even get him registered on time. It's Beşiktaş are far from at their best form right now. You know, they had a great Champions League campaign last year. They had actually a really good Champions League campaign the year before, I found, but were very unlucky on the last match day with some dubious referee decisions that cost them a loss against an already eliminated Dynamo Kiev on the last match day. That meant they would go to the Europa League, went to the quarterfinal, went out on penalties against Lyon. Good European campaigns the last couple of years under Şenol Güneş, and now the team isn't ready. It feels like there's holes in the team, as I said. Partizan, very difficult opponent. I think Beşiktaş are lucky that the first match is in Serbia and not in Istanbul like it was against LASK, because I think that's also kind of what hurt them a little bit. They didn't play a really good game against LASK at home either. However, they could have won that by 2-3-0, should have won it by 2-3-0, but they didn't. They only won 1-0, and that's a treacherous scoreline. And then, you know, the Austrians were super motivated for that game. Both their goals kind of came falling out of nowhere, but still, you could see it, that they were a lot more convicted. So I'm sure that goal from Negredo in the last minutes didn't just shatter those Austrians' dreams, but also kind of the Partizan fans, I imagine.
For sure. And there was talk of what's the situation with Negredo now? Is he still in the team?
Yes, he actually scored yesterday. He started his first match yesterday. Basically, the deal with Negredo is he earns a lot of money. He earns 4.3 million a year, which is, except for Pepe, by far our highest paid player. I think apart from those two, we have Domagoj Vida, who is earning 3.5, but then everyone else is earning less than 2.5. So there's a big gap there. So Pepe is around 4.7, then Negredo 4.3, and then Vida 3.5, and then everyone else is like 2.2, 2.3 from the top players. You know, Quaresma, Babel, Ozan, and then most of the starters are around 1.6, 1.7. So there's a big gap there. He takes up a huge chunk of the wage bill. He wasn't bad last year, but he wasn't worth 4.3 million a year. So the thought was, we have to get a new striker, but before we can get a new striker, Negredo has to go because he's our highest paid striker, and we have to balance our books. We are still under a financial fair play settlement, which requires us to reach full break even. Beşiktaş have successfully done that the past 2 years, but that was with Champions League money. That was also with a big sale from Cenk Tosun to Everton for 22 million. So it's going to be very difficult to do this one last time to balance those books completely. And this is their last year of financial fair play. If they do manage to balance their books, they're rid of it. It's gone. I mean, of course, then they still have to be careful, but at least then they can breathe a little easier. So the club really wants to get rid of that financial fair play settlement. So getting rid of Negredo was kind of a necessity. But at this point, with Larin, the young Canadian striker we have, not really cutting the mustard at the moment. Wagner Love was a huge flop, really. He wasn't what we were looking for, and Negredo is, unfortunately for Beşiktaş, to an extent, still by far the best striker they have. There was a rumor from AS on match day on Thursday after the match that he had scored his last goal for Beşiktaş and he was off to Monaco, but clearly they were wrong because he scored again last night, so it wasn't his last goal. But of course, he did get a second yellow card against Lask before taking off his shirt, celebrating his goal. So he won't be playing in that first leg against Partizan regardless. So Beşiktaş will probably start with Kyle Larin. And Jermaine Lens picked up an injury the other day against Erzurum. So it's not a serious injury, but he'll be missing training for 2 to 3 days. So he probably won't be fit and probably won't start. So I am expecting Ricardo Quaresma to start again, who got 2 assists and a goal on the weekend. There's definitely some interesting stuff going on in regards to Beşiktaş's squad. I think for Partizan, and I said this to Bernhard Kastler, who I spoke to from Austria regarding the last game, I think it is a good time if you want to pull off an upset on Beşiktaş right now.
Well, good. Partizan will be counting on that. I mean, the thing is that as a Partizan fan, along with the journalists, I think that this Partizan team has a lot of issues in defense. And the moment that it was confirmed that Mirkovic was coming in as the coach, the first comment was then, could he play as right back as well? Honestly. So, I mean, there's big issues in this team, especially on the positions of, for example, left back. We have... here's a fun fact. This is a fun fact that I've been saving for this podcast. Partizan left and right backs are both called Nemanja Miletic. So don't think it's a mistake on the squad sheet when you see Nemanja Miletic twice on there. It's a new thing. Like, you have to have matching left and right backs. They have to have the same name.
Serbs are trendsetters, aren't they?
Exactly. So here's the thing. One of the Miletics is actually very, very decent, and the other one is like a car crash, basically, in terms of how easily he loses the ball and kind of gets confused when an attacker runs at him. So there's lots of space for players like Quaresma to kind of push through those lines and kind of cause Partizan a lot of trouble. And Stojkovic, our goalkeeper, our captain, is very good. And I mean, he's Serbia's starting number 1 goalkeeper. And this is one of my favorite stories. Like, he's insane. Like, he's really certifiably insane. So
we're talking about Stojkovic now, right?
Yeah. We're talking about Partizan's goalkeeper and the Serbian number 1 goalkeeper, Vladimir Stojkovic. So basically, he went through the younger categories of Zemun and then signed for Red Star early on. So when he was a young player, he's 31 now. And basically he was kind of like this young, exciting new goalkeeper who kind of played some really good matches, played a fantastic match against Braga when Red Star managed to qualify for, I think it was the UEFA Cup at that time still. And basically... he gave a couple of interviews saying that his blood runs red and white and how he would never in a million years, like that he hates Partizan with like all his heart and stuff like that. And then he had a fantastic season at Red Star and was signed abroad. Then he spent a couple of years at Braga, which was the club that he performed so well against. And then he jumped around and changed clubs. I think he was in France, he was in England for a little bit, but he never kind of managed to settle in completely. And then Partizan qualified for the Champions League. This was, if I'm not mistaken, 2010, and needed a goalkeeper. and Stojkovic kind of wasn't getting any. He wasn't getting any playing time in any clubs, and it was kind of like coming up to important, kind of also to be visible for the national team because he was still our number one goalkeeper, wasn't playing, and Partizan signed him on a loan. And like, you can imagine the madness in Belgrade in Serbia when that happened among Red Star fans. I mean, you have this kind of rivalry in Turkey.
Yeah, we had it with Tümer Metin back in 2006 or 2007, which was a huge deal for us as well when he joined Fenerbahce after saying similar things, you know. Yeah, I mean, basically declaring himself as a Beşiktaş fan and making not like serious anti-comments, but he spoke on the pitch mainly with goals and with gestures and stuff like that. But our fans will definitely know how that feels.
Yeah, and then basically, but this is where the story gets like crazy. So basically, he signs for Partizan, and Partizan fans laughed. Like, I remember hearing, like, I got the notification that he was signed on loan to Partizan, and I laughed so much because, like, the Red Star fans held him up as like a hero of the club. Suddenly he's signing for Partizan basically out of mutual interest. Partizan need a goalkeeper, he needs visibility, he's going to get visibility in the Champions League, so on. Suddenly, after I think already a couple of weeks, he becomes the biggest Partizan ultra on that team. So after every victory, he goes and celebrates with the Partizan ultras in the south of the stadium, sings Partizan songs, chants, everything. And then it was a celebration of the title where he showed up in a shirt. He took off his goalkeeper shirt. Under it, he had a shirt that said, in Serbian, forgive me for my past mistake. Oh no, forgive me for my ugly history, for my ugly past. And like,
at least he didn't claim to be a Partizan fan from his childhood or anything.
But it's direct provocation, and this was after the initial signing, when he initially came in on loan and then afterwards signed for the club. He received death threats from Red Star fans, to the point where they actually, not just like your typical under parentheses, like, but I mean, like, you would expect death threats coming for crazy fans in these situations, but the Red Star fans actually wrote him an obituary saying that he died the day he signed for Partizan.
I think I remember that, actually. Vague recollection of this.
Yeah, I mean, they were so angry. Like, and still, if you mention his name today to a Red Star fan, which sometimes I like doing, they get so angry. And, like, you know the Panini sticker albums?
Yeah, of course.
So, like, everybody collects them ahead of the World Cup and everything. And Red Star fans who collect them still, after all this time, some of them insist on putting Stojkovic's sticker upside down in the album.
Oh, okay, at least they put it in. I figured they would, like, blacken it out with a marker or something.
Yeah, no, they insist on putting it upside down. And I remember telling some friends of mine, I was like, you realize you're ruining the album like that? And they're like, no, I'm making it better. Like, okay.
That's amazing. That's a great story.
Yeah, so that's Vladimir Stojkovic. And then there was drama in the national team because before, when he was our number one goalkeeper, Nemanja Vidic, who used to be the captain of the national team and who used to be the captain of Red Star and who's a Red Star, one of the biggest gentlemen of the game, and also another warrior and kind of like who holds class above everything else. He basically said to the FA, I am not going to play for the national team as long as Stojkovic is there as number one goalkeeper. He betrayed my club. So
that's crazy. Yeah.
Tons of drama. And yeah, I mean, like, if you follow him on social media now, you would think that he's just Partizan through and through, and that he's been Partizan through and through all his life. He loves posting photos of his children, very young children, like 2 or 3 years old, in full Partizan kits. Like, just the other day, he posted a photo of his kid at the beach listening to Partizan songs on repeat on the phone. And, like, you'd think that this guy was born in black and white when it's actually the complete opposite. And, like, he direct provocation, basically, is what he's done from the start.
It's basically like a Barcelona youth player who is like this huge Barcelona fan that goes to Manchester United or whatever for a few years and then joins Real Madrid and becomes the biggest Real Madrid fan in the world or something like that. Or of course, I mean, we have plenty of examples of this as well in Turkey. We have some crazy stories too, believe me. Players getting kidnapped on a boat, basically. And stuff
God.
Like that. But that's a great story and adds some color to the Partizan team for sure.
Yeah, he's our captain now, so he's basically seen as the most mature on the team, which he is. Yeah, I honestly think that a lot of the time he's a very good goalkeeper. So he's especially good at penalties. So
okay, it's good to know.
His reflexes are excellent, but when his whole defense leaves him hanging, which often they've done already this season, then he can only do so much, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I think that Partizan, when faced with a stronger, more fast-paced team than Nordsjælland, Nordsjælland already caused them trouble in the end of that second match in Belgrade, where they could have scored those 2 goals that would have led to kind of like a sensation of Partizan being kicked out. But I think that Beşiktaş's attack will kind of have a lot of space, and the question is who can score more, basically, because I mean Partizan they have kind of firepower up front that wasn't being used correctly, that nobody could score at one point, basically, under Djukic. Now, under Mirkovic, the players have kind of relaxed a little bit more into their roles. I think there's less pressure from media from the outside as well, from fans, and players have started scoring. And we have Marko Jankovic, who plays very well kind of in that attacking midfield role, and who scored a fantastic goal against Nordsjælland, kind of like the flowing attacking play that these young Partizan players have in them to produce, but that haven't been producing. So they showed glimpses of that against Nordsjælland, and there is kind of room for some nice play. We also have Ricardo, our attacker, who was signed at the beginning of this season, who from Portugal. He's from Cape Verde, and he kind of has a little bit of that jogo bonito in him, although he kind of showed everything that he can produce. Everybody's kind of waiting for that. He scored a very nice header against Nordsjælland, but everybody's kind of waiting for him to produce all of his potential, and I think everybody's hoping that could be against Beşiktaş. And let's see. I mean, there's room there for kind of players to make a name for themselves and cause an upset.
It's actually very funny what you mentioned earlier about people hoping that Mirkovic can play right back still, because Beşiktaş fans kind of have the same sort of running joke with Guti. You know, can't we make him put on his boots again and let him play at the number 10 position right now, because that's one of those big holes for Beşiktaş at the moment. So it's kind of funny that they're in a similar situation as Beşiktaş are at the moment. Different position, but you know, we both have our problems in terms of positions, I think.
Yeah.
But it's definitely, it sounds like there's a lot of anticipation for this game. And you already answered a couple of my questions. I personally didn't really expect that the defeat from 4 years ago was still lingering. I would imagine that's not such a big deal, but it kind of sounds like that's in a way your own Liverpool drama that we had, because we had that 8-0 defeat against Liverpool. When was it? Like, I think more than 10 years ago. And when we played Liverpool in the round of 32 or round of 16, 32, I think, the round of 32 of the Europa League a couple of years ago. That was actually the year that we played Partizan as well. The anticipation was huge, and the fans really wanted that revenge, so to speak, on Liverpool, and ultimately Beşiktaş got their revenge on penalties and eliminated Liverpool, of course, to progress to the next round, and then to get unceremoniously eliminated by Club Brugge of Belgium, which was very painful in its own way. But No, I definitely can think our fans will be able to relate a little bit to that. I didn't think that it would have left scars, but apparently it did.
It did. Partizan doesn't forget when somebody beats them in Belgrade, especially with, a 4-0 scoreline. It's not ever one you want to lose to wherever, but especially not at home. So it is lingering, and I think kind of there's a little bit of a connection. Like, I think there's a little bit of respect from Partizan fans about the fact that Beşiktaş are black and white. So I think there's kind of like, obviously we're not brother clubs or anything like that, but there is a little bit of that kind of like color connection there, where Partizan fans are like, Beşiktaş are a really big club, they're a really big black and white club. We can relate to that in a way. And I think, but yeah, that 4-0 is still kind of in the minds of a lot of fans.
Well, I can actually tell you a funny story. Many years ago, when I was still a young child, I was like a teenager or something. I guess it was back in 2004, 2005, something like that. This forum doesn't exist anymore, but there used to be this forum called blackeagles.org, which was an English forum for Beşiktaş fans. And we had a Partizan fan on there. His name was Milos. And he was also a Beşiktaş fan. So back then, there was always this talk about Partizan, Beşiktaş, who's the best and all that. Because he was a Beşiktaş fan, but Partizan came first, of course. So there's a slight chance that Milos is listening to this. Shout out to you, my friend. Long time no speak. But yeah, it looks like this is going to be a fun game. And what are your personal expectations? How do you see the chances for Partizan, and what do you think it'll take for them to pull off an upset? Because it would be an upset, I think we can safely say.
For sure. It would for sure be an upset. And I'm going to say that a lot of, it's a cliche thing to say, but a lot of things depend on that first match in Belgrade, and with what kind of mindset the club go into that match, and how much respect they give Beşiktaş, especially at home. And there was kind of a lot of call for fans, and a lot of thanking the fans for the atmosphere that they created in Belgrade for that second match against Nordsjælland. And I think that there's kind of like a better feeling around the club, but generally I don't think many people believe that we can actually cause an upset, just because there was so much negativity around this team before, and things are better now. But the fact is that this is not one of Partizan's strongest teams, especially in defense. And I think that Beşiktaş does have a strong attack, even without Negredo playing in that first match. I think that there's a lot of firepower in this Beşiktaş team that I'm not really sure Partizan's defense can handle. And I hope I'm wrong. I do. But my expectations personally, and I think it matches a lot of that of Partizan fans from around the club, aren't that high. And I think it would be a huge upset. And we'll see. I think it really does depend on the mindset that the players go into. And I hope that they go into into the match in a better mindset than us fans, who will kind of say there's not much chance. But if the players go in respecting Beşiktaş too much, then I don't think there's much of a chance. But I think if anybody could get something out of them, it is Zoran Mirkovic in a moment where, at the very start of his kind of tenure at the club, where everybody believes that he can do good and that he can cause change, including so many of these young players. So I think that it depends on how concentrated Partizan's defense is, and everything kind of goes from there.
Okay, so there's a couple more things I want to talk about, but the first thing that we probably should talk about is the fact that Partizan and Red Star as well both aren't playing or haven't played any matches this weekend. The Serbian FA have postponed their games in order for both of them to focus on their European qualifiers. Do you see this as an advantage or a disadvantage for Partizan?
Honestly, this is a trend that has been going on for a while. So every time Partizan or Red Star have a big European match, and these are those at the start of the season, basically, and then kind of if they do qualify, it also happens in the league as well, that matches are kind of postponed so that the team can concentrate on their European rival later in the week. And to be honest, a lot of Partizan fans were of the opinion that this time the match shouldn't have been called off. But then, of course, there's the standing rivalry with Red Star, that everything Red Star does, Partizan has to do as well, that they kind of have to be at the same level, and that if the FA and the league are going to postpone Red Star's match, well, then they have to postpone Partizan's match as well. So there's kind of that going on in the background as well. But, I mean, I think that the point is what everybody would have wanted was more game time for Mirkovic with these players, more kind of actual sessions for the players to get their level of physicality up, because what was clear that in the last 20 minutes against Nordsjælland, the team fell physically, mentally, in every sense, and could have easily kind of conceded those 2 goals that would have knocked them out. And the argument is that, and Mirkovic said afterwards that he was very proud of his team, that they had played 2 very high matches, but that high-level matches, but that in the last 20 minutes in Belgrade, like, the team lost their energy and basically lost their strength. And you're thinking, well, it's the 3rd round of the Europa League, and it's like the very, very start of the season. We're in August. If you're exhausted already, that's not a very good sign. And basically the argument was, well, then play that match against Rad, who are an intense opponent, who have a very intense fan base, and they're like a small kind of comparison lines that could have been drawn with Beşiktaş, that maybe this could be the really kind of great way to prepare for a European match of that intensity. And maybe I'm wrong, and maybe the rest that the players got for not playing this weekend will mean that they'll have more strength on Thursday, but I'm not really sure that postponing matches is the right way to go about doing things, and we'll see.
Yeah. Well, that's actually another point I spoke about as well with Bernard for the LASK preview. Because at this point in the season, you already touched on it, maybe match rhythm is more important, and I think Partizan already have an advantage in that regard because they have played more league games and they've played more the same amount of qualifiers, I guess. So they have a good amount of games under their belt already. So yeah, maybe I don't really see the benefit of it myself either, if I'm honest. I'm kind of, some of our fans were like, oh my god, no, what kind of shenanigans is this? But I'm like, it's not really in their advantage. Yeah, you can be maybe a little bit sharper, but I don't know if it's going to pan out that way. Now that the last thing I want to talk to you about is kind of, what do you expect? Do you expect Partizan to really come at Beşiktaş from the start? Do you think they're going to go for an early goal? Is that their plan? Or do you expect them to be a little bit more calculated, make sure they don't concede, and then try to get their goal? But you already kind of answered it, I think, by saying that it's going to be a matter of who scores the most goals.
Yeah, to be honest though, I don't see, even though obviously the first match is in Belgrade, I don't see the club kind of going all in and kind of hoping to score. And that's how they went in Nordsjælland for the first match, and it worked out really well for them. But then again, I think Beşiktaş is of a much higher kind of level. And I think that actually there will be some nerves there, that there will be a bit of sitting back, and that the club won't go. I mean, I think they'll be hoping for it, but I don't see them opening up completely and going for it in Belgrade right away. I think the start of the match is going to be a calmer one of kind of feeling each other out and then seeing where that takes it. Depends. Yeah. So, but I think Partizan do have the attack to possibly produce something like that. It's just a question of will they unleash it or kind of wait a bit.
Yeah. And European games are always so different as well, of course, because that away goal is so important. I mean, we kind of saw this in the weekend. Erzurumspor really came at Beşiktaş in the first half, and they like a whirlwind going over the field almost, and Beşiktaş was so bad and Erzurum was so good in that regard. But that does leave you exposed. It uses a lot of energy, and we saw that in the second half with them, that they couldn't keep it up anymore. And then Beşiktaş just went up and over them. And I think there's if you can do that and whirl over them and score 2 or 3 goals, I think that would be great for Partizan, of course. But if you do that and you score just 1 goal, I think you're sacrificing a lot of energy for relatively little payback, so to speak. So I'm curious to see how it's going to go. I think Partizan can definitely cause Beşiktaş if they take that type of risk early on, but it's definitely a calculated risk.
It's a big risk because, like you said, that away goal, I mean, could put Partizan in a lot of trouble if they concede it. And to be honest, I don't see this team not conceding a goal. So I think that it's a question of kind of maybe sitting back. And I think that even if the match ends 0-0 in Belgrade, I don't think Partizan will be disappointed. And they'll be thinking, well, Beşiktaş will be under a lot of pressure in Istanbul, and maybe that's a chance for us to score and cause an upset there. So not even that is out of the question, although I'm sure the team won't be going for a 0-0, but I don't think that they would be disappointed by it either.
Yeah, I actually had a friend of mine who said earlier 0-0 wouldn't be a bad scoreline in Belgrade. And
well, there you go.
and I was like, what are you talking about? That's like a super treacherous scoreline. That's a terrible scoreline, in my opinion. I'd rather lose 2-1 than have it finish 0-0, because if you lose 2-1, you know what you have to do.
Exactly.
If it's 0-0, then your players are always going to be subconsciously thinking, well, if we score one goal, it's enough. But then if they score, you're out. So it's very treacherous to think that way, I think.
Yeah.
So I think largely we've concluded what I wanted to talk about in regards to the team. I just want to spend a little bit more time on Belgrade, the city, Serbia, the country. I think Serbia, I've been there several times in my lifetime. I've been there right after the war. No, right before the war, right after the war. And then, when was this? Like 8 years ago or something. And I remember the last time I was there in the mid-2000s, and then 8 years ago. And I remember the difference between mid-2000s to, I think, early 2010s was absolutely massive, New roads, new infrastructure, everything looked so new. Serbia as a country seems to have come a very long way in the last 15 years, maybe. How is that in regards to the city, Belgrade? Is it a fun city to visit? Touristy-wise, is there lots of stuff to see? How do you think, of course, with Beşiktaş have a sort of a travel ban, so I don't expect many fans will travel. But if people are traveling and they're by any occasion listening to this, is there anything fun you can recommend for them to do in Belgrade?
I mean, Belgrade is such a fun city, and I have to say, so I've been living abroad on and off and kind of coming back to Belgrade for 6 years now. And the thing is that every time I would come back after, let's say, 6 months or something like that, the city would have changed completely. So, I mean, it's really establishing itself, and that's not even news anymore. Like, it's been there for a while as kind of like the Eastern European kind of shabby but cool, very cool city, kind of like the Balkan Berlin, I've heard a couple of times. And there's so much to do, especially kind of in this summer period where a city that's kind of known for its clubbing and for its kind of atmosphere in bars and clubs and cafes, and this kind of something that starts from 10 in the morning and then never stops, basically. Like, everything is full, all the cafes, all the restaurants, and then as you head towards evening, all the bars and the clubs, and there's just a really nice atmosphere down by the river, of course, especially where the famous kind of Splavovi, the nightclubs on the water, the floating nightclubs are, up to like in the center of town in Strahinjića Bana, the kind of the street that's known for its restaurants and bars, that's also known as being called Silicon Valley. And there's so much to do. And the thing is that, I mean, unfortunately, there won't be, like you said, there won't be a presence of visiting fans because of Beşiktaş's travel ban that's been there in place, and also because UEFA has officially qualified the match as high risk, and the two clubs have announced that they've agreed that there won't be visiting fans on either side. So it means that tickets won't be sold to any Beşiktaş fans, even if there were any who would defy the travel ban, let's say. And it will be the same the other way around, so there won't be any Partizan fans in Istanbul either, which I know that a lot were kind of gearing up to come. So that's, in one sense, it's a shame, because I think it would be an atmosphere kind of trigger to kind of see that, especially in Istanbul. But that kind of won't happen. So let's hope neither of our clubs get fined, because I feel like we're in constant probation from European football authorities.
Oh yeah, they love targeting them Turks and them Serbs, I think.
Yes, and I wonder why we're so well behaved all the time that I really don't understand. But so in terms of Belgrade, I mean, there's so much to do. There's so much good food to eat everywhere, and it's just kind of a case of not even necessarily making a plan of what to do, but just kind of coming to the city and seeing where it takes you and which restaurant kind of and bar catches your eye, and then taking it from there. And I mean, it's obviously Kalemegdan, the fortress, and the big park in the center of the city, where you have a fantastic view of where the two rivers meet, of the Sava and the Danube. That's a big kind of hub for both the Belgrade locals and for tourists, just because it's a nice place to cool off during the summer. The views are amazing. The park is huge. There's so much to see. There's the symbol of Belgrade, which is a huge statue of a naked man, which we call the Victor, Pobednik, and that kind of looks upon the rivers and upon the city. And so that's kind of like on Kalemegdan and the fortress as well. And there's a really nice atmosphere in the city. There's a positivity and a passion that I think every year gets stronger and stronger. And I'm really proud to say that things have definitely changed in the past 18 years for sure.
So if any of the Beşiktaş fans that stubbornly decide to travel and they get stranded in Serbia, in Belgrade, and they're not allowed into the stadium, in Faroe Islands there's sheep's head, in Austria there's obviously schnitzel. Is there anything in Serbia like a must-try dish that they can definitely get in Belgrade and that's going to blow their minds?
Well, the thing is, I mean, I think that a lot of our must-try dishes are pretty similar to yours must-try dishes. I mean, there's so much Turkish influence in Serbian culture and in Serbian cuisine especially. I mean, it's a lot of grilled meat. And obviously the typical thing is cevapi, which is like the little fingers of like the strips of mincemeat that are grilled. And so that's definitely, we have burek, and I know that you have a version of burek as well.
Yeah,
and exactly. So I'm not really sure what to recommend that you don't already have. I mean, you can try the Serbian version of all of these foods, but a kind of insider tip, which I like to think that it is a real experience for anyone kind of coming to Belgrade and that maybe otherwise they wouldn't experience, is there's a pizza place that's kind of like a place where you stand in line and get your pizza and go. So it's not a restaurant, it's more of like a shack almost, right in the center of town, and it's called Bucko. So that's Bucko, and it means it's kind of like an endearing way to call somebody fat. So it would be like chubby or chubsy, or like a nickname that you would give somebody. And the point is that they sell pizza either a box, like huge, or they sell pizza on the slice. And it's one of those things that maybe you eat after a night out at 3 a.m. when you're coming back from the club. And the thing that makes this pizza special, and that makes it like almost like a legendary thing in Belgrade, is that you order it and they offer beef salad to put on top of your pizza. And now that sounds awful. I know. It sounds like something that you should never, ever even consider mixing. But it's delicious. So for any stubborn Turkish and Beşiktaş fans coming to Belgrade, go to Bucko. It's right downtown, just past the main square. And wait in line, because there's always a line. And get a slice of pizza with beef salad on top, and you won't regret it.
Well, Sonja, you have me watering at the mouth right now just thinking of that amazing pizza with beef salad on top. I want to thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today, giving your insights on Partizan, and just giving people some fun travel trips on top of that, of course. So I would very much like to wish Partizan all the best in their future season, except, of course, this coming Thursday and next Thursday. And again, thank you so much for giving us all this information. And you're a great storyteller, and I think you did a great job. And, is there anything that you would like to plug? Where can people find you? Where can people follow you on Twitter, Instagram? I don't know, whatever sort of social media channels you're using. Please feel free to plug them now.
First of all, thank you for having me and for letting me talk about some of my favorite things, which are football in general, Partizan in particular, World Cup as well, and Serbia and Serbian food. I mean, I could talk for hours. But yeah, no, it's been a lot of fun. And I'm on Twitter talking about all of these things and kind of celebrating Serbian players in Europe and Partizan and everything and anything football that catches me in the moment on Twitter. Yeah, so I'm Sonja Nick13 on there, and I'm also on Instagram, which is less football, more private life. But I mean, anybody can join in and follow. And I'm Sonja with, I think, 2 or 3 A's on there, so Sonja. And so anybody can follow along, and we'll talk all things football in Serbia. And good luck to Beşiktaş in the rest of the season, not in these 2 matches. And may the best black and white team win.
And with that note, we'll send you out. And thank you for listening, everyone. And hopefully we'll come back with the next podcast with some positive news. May it be transfers, and if it's not, then hopefully after Thursday's match, of course. Thank you for listening. Good night. Oh look.
Okay. Oh, nice. Wonderful interview. Thanks so much to Sonja and to Kaan for getting her onto the podcast. Lots of great info there, of course, as always. Hope you all enjoyed it. With all that said, we're looking forward to the match once again. It's coming Thursday, August 23rd, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here in New York. You figure out what that means to you. Of course, should be an exciting match against Partizan. Now we know all about our opposition. I guess I'll be seeing us out this week. Kaan's not in for this portion of the episode. So, once again, thank you for tuning in. For the Black Eagles podcast and Beşiktaş International, this has been your host, Sinan Schwarting. And of course, Kaan Bayazit, the host of our interview. Sonja Nikcevic. You can follow her at... Well, she has 2 ats, as a matter of fact. She has an official FIFA World Cup account. I don't know how active that one still is or if it died with the World Cups. And just in case, it's at FIFA World Cup SRB. And she is the representative of that account. But her other account, and I suppose her probably more active, relevant one, is her personal one, at Sonja Nick13. That's SonjaNik13. She's always giving news on all things football related, particularly related to Serbia, of course. Yeah, you can follow me at Sir_rights_a_lot. You follow Kaan at Razzerian, RAZZERIAN. Follow the podcast at Eagles_podcast. Follow Beşiktaş International for all the latest news, everything Beşiktaş related as it hits the press at Beşiktaş_INT. And as always, spread the love. Tell everyone you know about the sensation that is the Black Eagles podcast. We do indeed have quite a few regular listeners now. And this week, we're going to be skipping the hashtag after the beep segment because this was an interview segment. There wasn't much to say about a match or anything in particular. Perhaps as Laureus Karius becomes official, we'll get some responses on that. And of course, we'll always have something post-match. But of course, stay in touch with us on Twitter at the accounts I already told you about. Let us know what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong. Hopefully mostly what we're doing right. And yeah, spread the love, share like, retweet, whatever you can do to, if of course you like what we're doing here, and if you don't, please, all jokes aside, please let us know. Yeah. Stay tuned for our upcoming match review of the Partizan match. And of course, we will be previewing our weekend's match in the Super League against Antalya. If you need a reminder on that, it will be on Sunday. We'll be at home at the Vodafone Park. It will be held at 2:45 here in New York City, Eastern Standard Time. So another late one for those of you in Europe. I suppose it's to accommodate for the summer heat. But anyway, that's enough for now. Keep your fingers crossed for a Loris Karius appearance. And of course, keep your fingers crossed that we'll have some news on the other fronts that we need some moves made on. Still need a number 10. Still need a striker. We might need another right back as well, but at this point, let's just, you get what I always tell my daughter. You get what you get and you don't get upset. That's how we have to take this transfer season. Loris Karius is a big win. And gosh, if we can get a Shinji Kagawa. But hey, let's just, keep those fingers crossed, keep knocking on wood. Yeah, and of course, go Beşiktaş. See you guys soon. I said we were skipping the hashtag after the beep. You've been had, but this is on you. Come to Beşiktaş, Shinji Kagawa. And Loris Karius, don't miss your flight, buddy. Peace.